Welcome back to another edition of 10 for Zen. What I would like to do is share with you some thoughts around a poem which is one of my favorite poems by Patrick Kavanagh called Advent. Now, this might take 3 sessions because I'm trying to keep the comments to 10 minutes long, thereabouts. So to discuss this poem with you, it might actually take 3 sessions instead of 1, but that's okay because there are 3 verses in it. So maybe I can do 1 verse per session, and it may go quicker than I think. So the poem is called Advent, and as you probably know, maybe some of you don't, Advent is a season or a period in the Catholic calendar, and it goes from the beginning of December up unto Christmas. So it's very similar to Lent, but shorter than Lent. And like Lent, it used to be a period of penance and practicing harder, we could say, in the world of Zen. But in Catholicism, it's a particular period of penance and renunciation and purification. So Patrick Kavanagh wrote this poem called Advent, and here it goes. He writes, "We have tested and tasted too much, lover. Through a chink too wide there comes in no wonder." So just taking those 2 lines to start with, we have tested and tasted too much, lover. So talking to his lover or friend, we have indulged too much. And you may have some sense of what that means, like when you've been partying too hard, or whether you've just been indulging yourself in various ways. So he says we have tested and tasted too much, we have overindulged. And then he says, through a chink too wide, there comes in no wonder. So we have this idea of through a chink too wide, or through a crack too wide, there comes in no wonder. So we have this idea of wonder. And to look at the world, whether it's the stars at night, or the moon, or the trees, or looking at the moon through the trees, or the sound of a river, looking at nature. Sometimes we have a sense of wonder about it, but sometimes we're so busy. We miss our life. We miss that sense of wonder. And what Kavanagh is saying is that through a chink too wide, there comes in no wonder. And it can very much be like that in today's world, that we're taking so much in, so much news and information, so much from the media. It's such a stimulating world. We're constantly going. Through that chink too wide, there comes in no wonder. And then he contrasts that with the room of an Irish cottage in the middle of the 20th century during Advent. He says, but here, in this Advent darkened room, so the room is darkened because of the season, it's winter, and we're heading towards the solstice. In fact, Advent would include the solstice, the winter solstice. So it's darkened from that perspective. But it may also have been that people were not indulging in television and radio or various forms of entertainment, and they were giving up these forms of entertainment as a penance. But here in this darkened Advent room, where the dry black bread of penance, where the dry black bread and sugarless tea. So these are two things. The dry black bread, it's something that I never experienced, certainly not as a penance, but it kind of conjures up the notion of bread that has gone off. Or maybe it was made without certain ingredients that it turned out to be black, but it's dry, so it doesn't have butter on it. This is really hard penance as far as I can make out, severe penance, where the dry black bread and sugarless tea of penance. Okay. Now the sugarless tea, in the middle of the 20th century, lots of people had sugar in their tea. And I remember, I think as a young teenager, for Lent one year, I gave up sugar in my tea. That was my Lenten penance. The thing is, though, that by the end of it, I didn't see any reason to go back to using sugar in my tea, so I just didn't go back. I don't know why anybody would want to go back to putting sugar in their tea after having spent 2 months or so without it. But Kavanagh lists it as one of the Advent penances. But here in this Advent darkened room, where the dry black bread and sugarless tea of penance, then he says, will charm back the luxury. So the contrast between luxury and penance. But what luxury will be charmed back by this penance? He says, will charm back the luxury of a child's soul. And isn't that just divine? What was it like to be a child? Will charm back the luxury of a child's soul. You can get a sense of this maybe if you go on a long walk through the countryside, and by the time you get to the end of it, your appetite is really sharp, you're really hungry, and you experience your appetite with a keenness, and the activity of walking has awakened your senses, and you're looking at nature and how beautiful it is and how stimulated you are and how engaged with it you are and you're part of it. This is the luxury of a child's soul, and we can get back to it through penance or just through going for a hike, I would say, across a hill or a mountain, through the woods, by a river, by a lake, by the sea. When we get back in touch with nature, we get back in touch with our child's soul, with the essence of what it is to be a child, and to look upon the world with the freshness of that child's mind. But here in this Advent darkened room, where the dry black bread and sugarless tea of penance will charm back the luxury of a child's soul. And it's a luxury because in the fast-paced modern world, that luxury is squeezed out of us. We don't have time or bandwidth or space for it. At least a lot of people don't. Maybe you do, maybe I do, because we are Zen practitioners, and that is what Zen is all about. You could say that Zen is immersing yourself in the luxury of a child's soul. To see the world with this freshness and immediacy and be awed by it. Then he says, we'll return to doom the knowledge we stole but could not use. And that's the end of the first verse. But we'll return to doom, or I would say oblivion. We'll outcast it, the knowledge that we stole. You know, we take in so much knowledge and so much trivia in today's world. Facts come into our mind and they are meaningless. So much information and so much of it is irrelevant. We've got to return that information. We've got to return that heap of triviality. Return it to doom. Return it to oblivion, to the unknown. Forget about it. Cast it out. Stop being on Facebook. Stop being on your phone. Stop absorbing information that is only going to stay in your brain for a few seconds, occupying that precious space. We'll return to doom the knowledge we stole but could not use. So the first verse. We have tested and tasted too much, lover. Through a chink too wide, there comes in no wonder. But here in this Advent darkened room, where the dry black bread and sugarless tea of penance will charm back the luxury of a child's soul, we'll return to doom the knowledge we stole but could not use. And with that, I'll say goodbye, and sometime soon I'll go through the second verse. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day.